Welcome, everybody. Good evening. It's wonderful to have you. It's wonderful to get together for something as interesting as this. We've put together a panel. These are panels that are actually happening around the community over the course of this week and next in various shuls. So I think we're one of the first, which is nice. Gives us a great opportunity. I want to extend a special welcome to Rabbi Ash and Rabbi Dovi Rabin, representing Chabad of Savoy and Chabad of Four Ways, respectively. For those of you who I've never met, my name is Shishler, Chabad of Strathaven. And we thought what we'd do this evening is each of us is going to touch briefly on one area related to the concept of Moshiach. And then we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions. We have had some questions already coming through, which is quite interesting. And we all know, it's one of these intriguing topics. On the one hand, something that people might find to be exciting and something to look forward to. And on the other hand, a little intimidating. I don't know what goes through your mind when you hear the word Moshiach. The way we're going to do it is in the first part of the panel. I'm going to ask everybody to stay muted. And if you do have a comment or you have a question, please use the chat option just to be able to type your questions or your comments. And then once each of us has presented on 3 topics, then it's going to be open season. You'll have an opportunity to talk. But as you know, Zooms don't work very well when people just talk over each other. So there is an option that you have to raise a hand, not physically to raise your hand. You raise a hand on the screen. There's a little option that you have in the chat function to raise a hand, and that will get our attention. And then we'll know that somebody has a question. We'll give you the opportunity to talk. So we're going to try and keep it as organized as possible under the circumstances. The first part, which I'll address, is the question of, is Messiah really a Jewish thing? Rabbi Rabin is going to speak about what can we anticipate, what sort of things are supposed to happen when Moshiach comes. And Rabbi Ash is going to speak about time of the signs. In other words, what's going on in our world, and does it indicate perhaps that we are living in the time of Moshiach? So that's what we're doing this evening. Again, thank you for joining. Just to clarify, if you're looking for the raise your hand thing, it's in the participants section, not in the chat, as I incorrectly said. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about the concept of, is the Messiah a Jewish thing? It reminds me a little bit of a story. There was a person, it's a sad story, but it's a true story. There was a person who, at some point in their life, as a relatively young person, became involved in a particular cultish movement that we affectionately call Jews for you-know-who. Ever heard of them? And it was a terrible disappointment to the parents and to the family, how it was that their daughter had gone off the rails and gotten involved in something that was so antithetical to everything Jewish. So they asked the daughter at one point, what was it? What got you into that wholly foreign kind of an environment? I mean, you went to a good Jewish day school, you had a bat mitzvah, you have a Jewish name. How did this happen? How did you go, so to speak, off the rails? And what she said was incredibly poignant and quite sad, actually. She said to her parents, when I was growing up Jewish, in the Jewish day school system, I never experienced something that was as moving and as touching as Psalm 23. Isn't that tragic? And unfortunately, that's what happens, right? Psalm 23, Mizmor LeDavid, part of our davening, something that we engage with on a regular basis, something that is part and parcel of Judaism. And yet, without the right kind of an education, here was somebody who thought that this was a wholly non-Jewish idea, something that was uniquely only available in another religion. And that's often what happens to us. People hear the word Messiah, especially when you hear it in the English. Ooh, that does not sound very Jewish. Do we believe in a Messiah? I've actually had people say this to me. I'm sure the other rabbis on the panel have had this experience as well. Where people say to you, is that really a Jewish concept? The concept of a Messiah? It sounds very Christian. It sounds very foreign. So we thought it would be a nice idea, just before we get into details, Let's tackle that particular question. Is it a Jewish thing? Is it something that maybe Jews have only cottoned onto in recent years because it became popular in other circles? I think that's sometimes what we think, in the same way as December is holiday time in other environments. So suddenly we've decided to make Hanukkah into a big deal, which obviously is not historically the reason for Hanukkah. So by the same token, I think some people think, because it's a clearly non-Jewish thing and the Jews were feeling a little bit left out, we had to come up with a Messiah of our own. So maybe a good place to start. The purpose of this evening is not to be absolutely exhaustive of the topic. On the contrary, we'd like you to go and research further. We'd like you to find out more about it. So by way of introduction, we do know that a very famous personality, a great Torah scholar, Maimonides the Rambam, defined that there are 13 fundamental principles of Jewish faith. Now, a fundamental principle of faith is like, for example, the belief in a God. And to believe that God is not physical, has no shape, has no form. That is a fundamental principle. It's that kind of thing that would be a fundamental principle of Judaism. One of the fundamental principles, and that means without it, the whole Judaism kind of collapses. It's an ikar, it's what holds the whole thing together. Just like the belief that Torah is divine is the principle that there is a Moshiach. It is that core to Judaism that the Rambam defines it as an ikar, something on which the whole of Judaism balances. If you don't have it, the structure of Judaism could collapse. Now that's a fascinating thought, actually, when you consider it, because many people would tell you, I can be a good Jew, I can daven 3 times a day, I can keep Shabbos and kosher and be benevolent to other people, and yet I don't believe in Moshiach. Are you telling me that I'm less Jewish? Are you telling me that my Judaism is not as strong as it could be? Well, there you have it. In fact, the Rambam, who I don't believe most people would consider to be a radical, says quite a radical thing about the belief in Moshiach. The Rambam has a 14-volume encyclopedia of Jewish law. It is the most comprehensive work on halacha, on Jewish law that exists. In fact, what you and I take for granted is the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, etc., is all based on the work of the Rambam. 14 volumes. And the way he wraps it up all the way at the end in his 14th volume, and his 2 last chapters, is he talks about Moshiach. And when he talks about Moshiach, so he says that there are certain things you have to know. One of them is that kol mi she'eino mamin boy, any person who does not believe in Moshiach. Remember, the Rambam is not a radical. The Rambam is seen as a rational mind in Judaism. So he says any person who does not believe in Moshiach and einoi mechake lebiasoi, and doesn't wait on tenterhooks, when is this going to happen? So he says that person rejects all of the works of the prophets and even the Torah and Moshe himself. Can you imagine that? So you and I probably think it's the cherry on the top, it's the dessert, it's a nice to have. Mashiach, it's a great thing. After we've done a whole lot of Jewish things, it would be wonderful if we would have the opportunity to have a messianic experience. But here the Rambam says, if you reject the notion of Mashiach, effectively you reject the entire Torah. That means to say that this is something which is absolutely core to what Judaism is. It's not something Judaism picked up along the way of our long travels through various other countries and cultures. This is fundamental to who we are. So much so that if you look in the Talmud, in the tractate Sanhedrin, the great sage Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo ivre alma ela leMashiach. The world was not created for any other purpose. These rabbis don't mince their words. They don't play politics. They don't say something just so that it sounds dramatic. He says, if you don't believe in Mashiach, you have to realize, Lo ivri alma, the world was not created for any other purpose except for Mashiach. Actually, that is alluded to right in the 2nd verse of the Torah. The 2nd verse of the Torah says, V'ha'aretz ha'isa toihu v'avoihu. The original form of the world was absolute chaos. V'choshech al panei sohoim. And this darkness that overwhelmed everything. V'ruach Elokim merachefes al panei hamoim. But there was the Spirit of God that hovered over the waters. And our sages say the Spirit of God means the Spirit of Moshiach. In other words, before the world had even taken form, before there was the sky and the the sun and moon and animals and humans, there was already Moshiach. As we say every Friday night, soif ma'aseh v'machshava techila, that whatever is the ultimate goal is the first intention. So the Torah wants us to know the ultimate goal of the whole of existence is expressed right in the first intention. Now, we could talk about this for a long time, but we've allocated a finite amount of time to each of us. So I'll end off this segment with the following thought. The Psikta, which is one of the Midrashic commentaries from our sages, says that Hashem has a criticism of the Jewish people. And his criticism is, Chivavtem Torasi, you have cherished my Torah, but v'lo chikisem lemalchusi, but you haven't waited in anticipation of when I would restore my kingdom on earth, which effectively means that it's all very well to keep the whole of Torah and to love the Torah, but if we're not waiting for Moshiach to come to reestablish Hashem's kingdom on earth, we might well be missing the point. Okay, that's by way of introduction. We're going to move to Rabbi Dovi Rabin to tell us a little bit about what happens when Moshiach comes.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Shishler. It's an honor and a privilege to share this wonderful platform with both yourself and Rabbi Ash. Wonderful to be together with so many people and to discuss this incredible topic. Also like to make mention of very big thanks to Rabbi Yosef Chazdan from the Jewish Learning Institute, who's put tremendous effort into organizing a number of lectures that you'll see going on around town, many Zoom classes on the topic of Moshiach. So carry on looking out on Facebook, and please God, through the study of all of this, it will bring about the actual coming of Moshiach, what we're all waiting for. So the topic is what is going to be when Moshiach comes, which is quite difficult as to, this is like a fully blown question. What is actually going to happen to the world when Moshiach comes? So to preface it, by nature, as human beings, we are scared of change. We fall into comfort zones. We fall into a position in life where, things are okay, things are good. I don't want too much change. And if anything's taught us that more than that now is what we're currently going through, or the current status of the world, of Corona, everything's upside down. But by nature, we are people of falling into a comfort zone. We fall into a box and we don't want too much change. So to try and imagine something that's going to bring about so much tremendous change to the world is quite scary, to the degree that many people have said to me, in a bit of a scary way, Rabbi, I'm not so sure if I actually want Moshiach to come because, I'm quite comfortable with the world that I'm living in. So we'll discuss a little bit of that later on, perhaps in the questions and answers. But there's a fascinating story, which I think, will set us in the right frame of mind going forward, told of Reb Peretz Chaim, who was a great Hasidic, big Chassid in Russia. And try and picture the scene. He's sitting in a bunker, they've hidden away, having a bit of a gathering, studying some Torah. They weren't allowed to be doing it. It was against, the Tsarist regime. And they lit some candles in the room in order for there to be a little bit of light, no electricity. And as the evening is going on, obviously those candles are starting to burn out bit by bit. And as the candles are burning out bit by bit, it obviously starts getting a little bit darker in the room. Naturally, you're losing your light as the wax is, becoming less and less. And until the wee hours of the morning, somebody walks in and the candles are, are flickering. And basically, somebody says, what are you people doing sitting in the dark over here? And he says, what do you mean sitting in the dark? Like, this is the room. Until they actually realized that it was quite dark in the room, that the candles had actually pretty much gone out. So by way of analogy, Reb Peretz in that particular Farbrengen went on to explain that what tends to happen in our lives is we get accustomed to the darkness. And we live in a dark world, but it's dark and that's what we're used to. So we fall into a zone of being comfortable. So when we talk about the coming of Moshiach, what's going to happen, many of these things are like, wow, that's a bit scary, like I don't really want to go there because, it's a bit too much. But let's try and think out of the box and think maybe we're living in this dark room And what we really need is to go into a much, much brighter and lighter place. So the first thing to address is this a utopian dream of Moshiach? You know, like what is this all about? And ultimately what we have to realize is that the Torah itself tells us that the sole purpose of creation, while God Almighty created our physical world, was to make something called a dira b'tachtonim, which is a dwelling place down here below for himself in this physical world. And the dira b'tachtonim, the dwelling place accomplished down here below in this world, is during the times and the coming of Mashiach. This is the reason why we exist. This is what we're heading towards, doing more and more to get us to that stage of dira b'tachtonim. So is it a utopian dream? Absolutely not. This is what we want. This is what we're heading towards. This is our whole purpose. Now, imagine it like this, perfect time and analogy to use. Prior to, evil or coming into the world, Adam and Eve were living in the Garden of Eden, and came along something called the Chet Eitzadah, ate from the tree of knowledge. And as a result of that, Zulma, impurity, comes to the world, and all challenge and trial, tribulation comes into the world. But before that, the world was in a utopian era, the time that we're heading towards, what we're waiting for the times of Mashiach. So what happened through the Chet Eitzadah, the eating from the tree, was actually like a virus came to the world. That's what came as a result of eating from the tree. So comes a virus to the world, and you're stuck in a state where you have a virus. Now, what do? How do you get out of this state? How do you get rid of this virus? So you got to search for a vaccine. Now, I'm going to say that the vaccine that we're searching for over here is not a vaccine like we're looking for coronavirus, which will be preventative from actually getting, God forbid, the disease of coronavirus. The vaccine that we're going to get over here of Mashiach is going to completely transform the world and take the world to a utopian era where things are going to change drastically. So what do I mean when I say things are going to change drastically? Let's just go through a few basic examples, and then I'll hand over to Rabbi Ash. Our main source obviously comes from Maimonides, as Rabbi Shishler mentioned before, but Mashiach is spoken about by all the prophets. It's brought down in Torah, Yeshayahu, Yecheskel, Amos, Yirmiyahu, Zephaniah, Malachi. Torah talks about it in Devarim, but the Rambam really is the one who codifies it and spells it out in black and white for us, clearly. And just to sort of preface this, we have to understand that a lot of these things that we're told when Mashiach comes and what's going to actually happen in the world, there's tremendous debate as to, is it going to be that way or is it going to be the other way? Nothing's clear cut. Rambam himself, Maimonides himself, says that our opinion, but he leaves room for other opinions to exist, that it might not be that way, and we will only know the way that it's going to be when the actual event happens, when it occurs. Maimonides himself says that. Now, in the Talmud, in Sanhedrin, it basically gives us conflicting verses in numerous places. So it brings down a verse where it says, Hashem tells us, Yeshayahu quotes a verse whereby he says, Ani Hashem be'ita u'ba'achishena. He says, I am Hashem, in its time, I will hasten it. So the Gemara immediately asks, what does it mean, in its time, I will hasten it? Either Mashiach's coming in its time, or Hashem's going to hasten it, it's going to come early. And the Gemara goes on to expound and say, in its time means that if we are not meritorious through actions that we do while we're in exile, then there's a cutoff point where Mashiach's going to come. If we are meritorious as a result of actions that we do during exile, then Mashiach can come early, along the lines of the two conflicting verses where it talks about Mashiach coming allegorically on a cloud, and in another way it talks about him coming on a donkey. It can't be both, it's got to be one or the other. So coming on a cloud is talking to Mashiach coming in a swift manner. Coming in a swift manner will be as a result of our meritorious deeds. If it doesn't come as a result of our meritorious deeds, then Mashiach comes riding as a poor man riding on a donkey. So we have to understand that there's conflicting views and conflicting opinions as to what's going to be. But Rambam clearly tells us, Maimonides, very, very clearly that the steps and the stages of what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. Let me just go through a few of them very, very quickly. He says Mashiach is going to come and he's going to restore the Beis HaMikdash. Now that within itself is a debate again. What does it mean he's going to restore the Beis HaMikdash? Is he going to build the Beis HaMikdash himself? Or is it, as so many of us have been told and know and have heard, that the Beis HaMikdash already exists, the third temple, and it's just sitting up on high, and it's going to come down to the world? And that is a debate that exists between Maimonides and the famous commentary known as Rashi. How exactly is that going to work? But regardless of that, the first stage or the first thing that's going to happen is the Rambam Maimonides is going to come and restore the temple, the Beis HaMikdash in Jerusalem. Then there will be the gathering of the dispersed of all of Israel from around the world. As we pray 3 times a day in the Amidah, we say, Makapetz Nidche Amo Yisrael, that God should gather us all together from all corners of the world. That will be the next stage. It will be followed by the Sanhedrin, the great courts being reappointed. The 71 great sages will be reappointed. But more importantly, and I think what most of us like to focus on, is the concept of the awareness of Hashem, a complete transformation, change of mind, change of mindset, as to really trying to focus and think what's going to be when it is that Mashiach comes. What's going to happen on a day-to-day basis? And our whole mindset is going to change, in that we are going to spend our time focusing on the knowledge of Hashem. Will desire exist? Yes, desire will exist, but desire is going to exist in a way where we want to understand more about godliness. Again, as Maimonides tells us in the very same source. Just to point out that afterwards we'll put up some sources where people should definitely follow up with additional readings. It's very short and difficult in 10 minutes to put this all together in like we say, al regel achas, on one foot, because the topic, doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an, well, it does have an end. We're waiting for Mashiach. But there's so much to do. But we know that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be no more war in the world. There's going to be no more death in the world. We say, death will be swallowed up for all eternity. It will no longer exist. We'll no longer be driving on the road and see the poor lady with her children standing over there and having to give her coins, because there'll be no more poverty in the world. The world is going to go to a stage or to a state where there will be no more challenge, difficulty, temptation, desire within a negative space. And to conclude, it's very important to note that there are going to be 2 different stages within the coming of Mashiach. There's something called Yemois HaMashiach, and then there's something called Tchias HaMeisim. Tchias HaMeisim is a discussion, the resurrection of the dead in its own right, which I can't go into right now because I'm limited on time. But Yemois HaMashiach is the initial phase, which will then be phased into Tchias HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead. So I'm going to hand over to my esteemed brother-in-law, Rabbi Ash, to continue, and then there'll be time for plenty questions. I wasn't able to get through nearly enough because there's still so much to discuss, but hopefully we'll get an opportunity to do that.
Thanks, Rabbi Rabin. Thanks, Rabbi Shishler. Welcome to everybody, obviously, in the forum. It's a privilege to obviously be part of a forum like this. Obviously, my brother-in-law, a very close friend of mine, Rabbi Shishler, for many, many years. There's a story told. So before I get on to that, I'm going to be talking about the relevance of Mashiach now. So are we actually living in a messianic age? There's a story told about an adolescent camel. He's standing over there with his mom, and they're having a chat, and they're just talking. And this little adolescent turns to his mom and says, "Mommy, I want to ask you a question. Why do I have this big hump on my back?" And the mother replies, "You need to understand, we have this hump on our back to prevent us from hunger, to prevent us from going through thirst when we're trekking through the desert on these long journeys in the heat and in all of this amazing, beautiful desert. We need that hump to hold and to store our food and drink." He looks at his mom and says, "Amazing." So, "Mom, why the long eyelashes?" So, "You don't understand. Of course, it's obvious. We have the long eyelashes because of the winds that come through and the sand in the desert that comes, it blows around, prevent the sand from coming in our eyes. We have to have these long eyelashes to protect us." So I understand the hump, I understand the eyelashes, but why the awkward feet? What's with these really doff-looking, obscure feet that I've got to have all my entire life as well. And she says, you need to understand that these feet are there in order to prevent, or at least to look after and support our legs. As we walk in the desert sand and we walk in the soft standard sand, it enables us to walk through the desert. And frustrated and irritated, this little adolescent looks up to his mom and says, "Ma, what the heck are we doing in the Joburg Zoo then?" And the truth is, the reality is, that's often the way life is. We've got most incredible talents. We've got most amazing things around us. And we're often caught in our own reality without realizing exactly why we're here and what we have around us. So I think what I'm going to try and unpack in the period of now is exactly that. Are we in the zoo still? Or are we going to start making our way out into the desert for the camel? So as the two rabbis before have both mentioned it, there's actually, the person really goes into real detail about Moshiach. And even the Rambam, Maimonides, doesn't go a lot into detail. There's actually very little that is very known in reality of exactly what's going to happen when Moshiach comes. There's a lot of things we'll find out there. But there's a whole bunch of laws that Maimonides goes through. So I just want to tie it into where we are now and see, do we actually live in a Messianic age or not? So one of the things Maimonides is very clear about, that we should never entertain the notion that in the era of Moshiach, that it'll be unnatural. It's an actual natural order that Maimonides explains. Nature will not be nullified. It's not a time of absolute miracles. And therefore, within the nature of the times that we're in itself, we need to see, is it a Messianic age? Funnily enough, he does talk about the idea of the resurrection of the dead, Rabbi Rabin said. And the Rambam explains those are two stages. I'm going to talk about the natural stage of it. So one of the most famous sources and ideas, Maimonides, it talks about the idea of the wolf dwelling with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat. And Maimonides explains that doesn't necessarily mean that a wolf will actually lie down with the lamb, but it actually means that Israel, the Jewish nation, will end up being able to live in peace more than ever with its neighbors ever before. And I was just actually looking over the last few years alone in the current government within Israel and around the world, if you think about it, whether it be Egypt, Jordan, UAE, whether it be Bahrain, whether it be Sudan, people with over years and decades of absolute hatred. Is there plenty more to work on? There's no question about it. Is there formal peace treaties to be made in a lot of these countries? Yes. But there are airlines starting to land in Israel, treaties already beginning, peace created across many of its borders. No question talks about the idea of that throughout our lives, our enemies are starting to come to the realization and idea that we need to actually come to the fact and understanding and belief and agreement that the times are those of peace. One of the most famous things that everybody talks about, I'm going to choose a handful of them and go through them as quickly, and I do apologize, is the idea of swords being plowed or being beaten into plowshares, weapons of war being turned into into modules or equipment of peace. And I think this is one thing I could ever say that no question is absolutely in our face, has got to be now. There are an array of different things out in the world at the moment to prove that. I mean, if you take one of the most, we're sitting here now on a Zoom. We're sitting on an internet charge-driven concept of hundreds of Jews around the world on this Zoom alone, never mind all out. This idea of internet. Internet was started in the 1960s by a place called ARPANET. The American military created something called ARPANET, which was Advanced Research Project Agency Network. In October 29, 1969, was the first time a node-to-node information was passed across. Used for what? For the Cold War, for pure military. That military weapon, the internet, has now become the single biggest utensil in every one of our lives. For music, for education, for GPS, for medics to get around the world. The entire essence and being of pretty much communication, for sure during COVID, but even before, the idea of the entire world filled with Torah and godliness started off from one of the greatest weapons ever created by the American military in their world and the Russians in theirs, purely in the Cold War at a time they wanted to nuke each other. More than that, there's an incredible defense system called the DMSP F-15. What is it? So it's a nuclear weapon, a missile, which is called the Titan II rocket, which was used literally with nuclear warheads, was sitting on top of it. in order, again, during the Cold War, for America within the second, funny, one of them sat right in New York City. I read an article about it today, funny enough, but didn't land up happening. By push of a button within 5 seconds, the missiles up and Russia doesn't exist. Practically, what were those missiles used for at the end of the Cold War? Those were the missiles that were used to send the satellites in the sky that we have today for the internet that we have, and more importantly, for the weather. So the weather satellites that we have in the heavens that are there to assist us to keep track of tsunamis, to keep track of everything we have, were physically sent up into the atmosphere with nuclear rockets, taking the weapons of the world and turning into things of peace. Surgery, microsurgery. How do you go and find hit the exact moment and point of a surgeon? They use laser technology. Once again, the lasers were created for weaponry. Weapons of war, weapons of destruction, created and put in the world, which are used every single day around us. Never before, it's unprecedented. There's so many things that were used for not just destruction. They weren't swords and guns, one-on-one battle. These are weapons that were used to obliterate nations, obliterate continents, are now used as the single biggest tools for communication, for education, for GPS, for medics, for music, you name it. The world that we have today is fully based and functional of exactly that. Funny enough, one of the most hectic things that is and it's been a huge debate actually when it came up, but a Nazi medic or doctor, I don't think you can call him a doctor, called Edward Penkov, was a Nazi in the camps. And funny enough, the anatomy book that is still used today throughout every single university and medical journal came off his findings during the war. There's actually a debate in Israel at the time when it came out and they started writing the medicine, should they actually use it or not? But once again, an absolute tool of destruction has become a center core to IVF today. I spoke to a doctor about it. There's a lot of the anatomy was learned. And literally the anatomy book used by everybody today, funny enough, comes through then. We are told by Moshiach time, we are a time where there'll be no more famine. We are a time where there'll be food out all over the place. And I was looking in 1860, 20,427,013 people died from famine. Thank God I'm not Zoom. I got through that number quite well. In 1960, there's 1900, just over 12 million. 1940, 16 million due to the war. In 2018, 255,000 people died from famine. And most of those, 80-90%, were not caused by lack of food, was caused by war itself. So it were human causes which created the idea of the famine that we live in today. In the 20th century, 75 million people died from lack of food. Currently, it almost doesn't exist. And you go through the different concepts and ideas and moments that we're living in our world, when it comes down to the world we live in now, and what the Rambam says about Moshiach, the idea we're told, for example, and I'm going to conclude with my segment on this and open up to questions, is practically, if you look at the period of Moshiach, we're told when God created the world, He created the world for each day of creation, pretty much resembles 1,000 years of the world's existence. So you pretty much have 5,000 to 6,000 years of the world's existence, and the Shabbos period of the creation of the world is the period of Mashiach. So you talk about the period of Mashiach, a question that's often asked, how long is Mashiach? So generally, most opinions hold it's approximately 1,000 years plus minus. Some opinions say 250,000 years. There's a whole bunch of debates and numbers on it. But the truth is, how are we going to live for 1,000 years? And the truth is, magically, there's one disease that every single person, no matter what happens, start getting sick of, start immediately when they're literally older children and becoming teenagers. It's called old age. Your genetics itself start going down already as a young age. They've got medicine around, funny, already created in the late 1990s, where they tested on a mouse, that a mouse is able to regenerate its own organs and limbs. Currently now, from 1940 to year 2020, the average age, generally in the 1940s was, and even just, and I say taking the war out, was living into the mid-40s to 50s. Now we're living at average age 75, 80. You're already doubling without anything, just regular medicine. But imagine that you're able to prevent your genetics from failing over. Imagine your organs can recreate itself. That's currently medicine now. They believe already now to live to 100 to 120 is not complicated. Based on this new medicine they found, they're saying anywhere from 250 years to 1,000 years will become a possible concept, but not sick in a wheelchair and out of the gate. Proper, alive, energetic, and living. That means you live in a current natural format where that type of stuff can take place. And if you talk about do we live in a messianic age, I'm going to let you answer that question. Look around, see what the Rambam says, and look around what's going on, and you answer that question. I know we're getting to questions now, but I know that few questions were sent through before. So I'm going to answer one of the questions straight away. This is considered the question, not my 10 minutes. I broke my 10 minutes. Because I was asked, and I don't know if there's a clear answer for it, but the idea was the idea of coronavirus. Do we believe that coronavirus is an idea? Or is coronavirus a sign of Moshiach? And he tied to a question that came from another, the one I could ask, one of his close friends asked me, why is it that always we talk about Moshiach, it's based on disaster? Why is it be like a world war? What? Every time there's a disaster, it says messianic. Can't it just be of something positive? Can't it just be a positive energy? They said because there's positivity, it's Moshiach. So what I've shown you till now in the last 10, 12 minutes, there's plenty positivity about Moshiach. There is the idea about Gog and Magog, which is a war, a form of disaster. And when obviously we don't want more, so every time there is a disaster, a lot of people do tie to Moshiach. But can I say Corona specifically is a concept of Moshiach? I'm not convinced we can say that. At the end of the day, God runs the world. So famous, somebody once asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I believe someone mentioned it, the idea of why did the Holocaust happen? And was it because people over there sinned or did anything wrong that the Holocaust took place? The Rebbe's clear answer was, how dare Basar Adam, how dare a person made up of flesh and blood, a human being, try to work out God's ways? Our job is to see what we can deal with. Can I tell you coronavirus is created in order to ignite us from Mashiach? That's God's job. I can't tell you yes or no. Can I for any moment think that the losses and pain and challenge people have gone through is there to create Mashiach? I can't. I really don't believe that. It's not for me to make that call. However, is it unprecedented at the same time that there's a disaster, a tsunami hit, the East already hit. But Corona's managed to affect literally almost every human being in the world. Africa's usually left out of the world's agendas when things go on. We're in it. South Africa, we've been locked down for 3 months. Still can't get cigarettes for the smokers. Good, alcohol's going to be banned again. I mean, this is crisis, let's be honest. But practically at the end of the day, there's almost nowhere in the world that has not been affected by coronavirus. At the same time, it was a time when people have united far more than any other time. We've got a chance to look into our own home and see what's important. So can I say that it's because of Mashiach and it's a lead up? I believe everything's part of the process to lead up to Mashiach. Can I tell you this is the Gog and Magog? I'm going to let God do his job. Let God do what he does. I'll try working in my small mind what I think I can do. On that note, I'm going to let the questions flow, and Rabbi Shishler will run and control it from there.
Shkach, everybody, and thank you to everybody for participating, and of course to Rabbi Rabin, to Rabbi Ash. It's quite something. The questions are flying in. While Josh has put on the public chat, there are quite a number of questions that have come through on the private chat as well, quite a few. So we'll try and do justice. Do justice. I'm going to start with the question that came through first, which was a question that there seems to be a lot of emphasis on a man, a human who will save the world, the person, the human Moshiach. And is that really a Jewish thing? I'm paraphrasing the question just to summarize it, because surely in Judaism, we don't confess to a priest. We have a direct line straight to God. So why the emphasis on a human being who is Moshiach? It's a very, very interesting question. I don't know if any of the other rabbis want to weigh in. I'm just looking quickly to see if there's anybody rushing over here. Rabbi Ash, Rabbi Rabin?
No, I'll take the next one. Take that one. I'll answer. There's another one on the next one.
So it's an interesting question, which actually segues into another question about Mashiach that many people don't ask. Just to quickly for a second, Justin, I see your hand is raised. We'll come to you in a second. Anybody else has a question that you'd like to say Verbally, just do the raise your hand. It's in the participants window. You get a chance to raise a virtual hand. So it segues into another question about the notion of Moshiach being a king. You know, we live in a democratic world. We live in a world today that people are rejecting any kind of autocratic leadership, and certainly any heavy-handed leadership. I mean, you only have to look at the protest action that's going in all over the world at the moment. So what's this notion suddenly of a king? You know, how's that going to sit with the Western world and democracy? So very briefly, because it's a very broad concept, you get kings and you get kings. You get the kind of king who is in the role because they should be there. And then unfortunately, as history goes, you get the kind of king who's in the role and they don't really belong there. And it's unfortunate that they landed up in the position or inherited the position. As far as the Torah is concerned, the role of a king is that a king tells us to do things we would never have thought of on our own. King has sweeping powers. He can tell us to do things. Whether we understand them or not, we have to oblige him. The king himself is supposed to be somebody who is absolutely 100% dedicated to Hashem in a way that is beyond what you and I could relate to. Somebody who doesn't make a move, doesn't flinch if it's not exactly orchestrated the way that Hashem wants it. And because that's higher grade for us, and it's something we don't necessarily relate to, so we relate better to a person. When we have a person, you look at this person and you say, this is the ultimate example of how I'm supposed to live. And this is a person who can talk to me and guide me very similarly to what Moshe did when he took the Jews out of Egypt. He didn't just take them out of Egypt. He took them on a journey. He brought them close to God. He explained things to the people in a way that not only could they understand, but radically changed their lives. So if you keep that in mind, you understand a little bit why Moshiach is a person, so that he's relatable on the one hand, somebody who can talk to us, somebody we can interact with, but is in a league of his own on the other hand, and he can take us places that we on our own would not be able to go. There are many questions on the chat coming through, literally coming through fast and furious. Rabbi Rabin has, I think, an interest in the next question. So the question is, if all the Jews...
A question that came through earlier, just that somebody had asked before, was in regards to Tchias HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead. What is the process and how is that going to work, etc., etc. So just to touch on it very, very, very briefly, as discussed earlier, Maimonides talks about two different stages: Yemos HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach, and then a second phase known as Tchias HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead. Now, there's big argument as to how long is that gap in between the two of them, how many years is it. The generally accepted opinion from Zohar, from Kabbalistic thought, talks about 40 odd years, but what does 40 years mean exactly? We're not 100% sure if it's our 40 years of today or if it's a different type of 40 years, but that's a generally accepted view that I've come across. But the idea is that Mashiach will come. As we discussed earlier, there will be the process flow of what Mashiach is going to do. At that same point in time, when we hit the stage of the Yemos HaMashiach, the days, the coming of the actual Mashiach, Tchias HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead, will already start at that point in time for certain individuals. We know, for example, many of the righteous will start coming back at that stage. We know Moshe and Aaron are going to be present, so they'll be back because they're going to guide us and direct us as to inside the Beis HaMikdash, inside the temple. So Tchias HaMeisim, this process, this resurrection of the dead, is already going to start from an earlier stage, and then it will be a follow through until, I guess, the 40 years when the entire process will take place of all of us being reunited with our loved ones. And that when we go to being reunited with our loved ones, that is the Tchias HaMeisim. And to add to that, the idea of Tchias HaMeisim, this resurrection of the dead, as going back to Maimonides. And the reason why we keep on saying going back to Maimonides is because the Rambam is the one who talks about Mashiach at such, well, when I say at such length, it's not even so much where it is the teachings, but just those few chapters are packed with information. So take some time and go look it up right at the end, as Rabbi Shishler said, at the conclusion of the Rambam's teachings. Yeah, definitely Mashiach is a topic, as we've said, that you got to just keep on looking into it more and more and more. And I think the most important point, just to add, as before we continue with the questions, is how do we actually bring about the coming of Mashiach? Because we haven't really spoken about that. We've spoken about, what will be and how it will be and what's going to come, etc. So we're very fortunate in the generation that we live in today that the Lubavitcher Rebbe is part of our generation, and all of his teachings are freely available to all of us. Many people had the opportunity to meet him in person, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe was Moshiach crazy, if you want to call it. This was his whole mission, his whole goal was to bring about the coming of Mashiach. And the best possible way, he said, that we can do it is through more acts of goodness and kindness, doing another good deed, doing another mitzvah, studying more Torah, and in particular, to live with Mashiach. How do you live with Mashiach? The way to live with Mashiach is to study about the coming of Mashiach. What is going to happen when Mashiach comes? What's the world going to look like? All the things we've been discussing, but to further your study in this particular area is definitely going to hasten the coming of Mashiach.
Shkach Rabbi Rabin, I think we're going to go. There are a bunch of questions. We'd like to get through all of them. So we're going to give shorter, perhaps more introductory responses to the questions. And as Rabbi Rabin said, you might want to look a little bit further on your own. So we're going to come to Justin, who has his hand up in just a moment. There is a private question over here that says, there's an emphasis of Mashiach coming during the month of Nisan. Why is this so if we believe that Mashiach can come at any time? It's a really good question, because actually we're taught that the concept of Mashiach is every single day. We say it in our prayers, it can come every single day. There are certain times that, because of the spiritual nature of the history associated with that time, like, for example, Nisan is the time of the Exodus from Egypt, first time around. So the energy is there. It kind of makes it more palatable for us, maybe more accessible for us. But we should never for 1 minute believe that Mashiach can't come today. Any day is as good as any other day for Mashiach coming. Lauren Sander had a question, which I'm going to pass to Rabbi Ash. If there won't be poverty, will there be materialism? Will we all be equal?
So this ties into another question I've got privately as well. When Mashiach comes, will there still be Man United? So I'm hoping that it'll rather be Liverpool, to be honest. That's for my brother-in-law Dovi. But the truth is, remember, Mashiach's in a physical body. It's a physical entity. So it absolutely will be a materialistic world. However, we are told Mashiach comes, all that changes our view. When we do mitzvot now, we don't see the garden as we bring down. Mashiach comes, our eyesight, our glasses change, our spectacles change, and we see the godliness in the world of everything we do, which will lead us to live different lives. Totally materialistic in a physical world, we probably won't be as materialistic, which makes all the changes of which you talk about for the Mashiach.
All right, Justin, we've kept you waiting. Justin Kruger, had your hand up for a long time.
Okay, good evening, guys. Thanks for this lovely chat. It's very interesting with Rabbi Ash. You were talking about how essentially all these negative things, i.e. the Nazi doctor, the nukes, etc., stuff, the things that were created for bad that were actually flipped and ended up being used for good. Now, one of the biggest things that has been advertised here or said here is the abolishment of death. The death will rise and no one will die anymore and things like that. And in that sense, just to a layman, that does sound like, death is, say, the bad thing. If that's the case, or is that the case? Because if life, our lives are so, carry a lot of purpose because we do know it ends. So that thing of death, which is so-called bad, makes us live harder, makes us live more purposefully. So is death the bad thing, or do we actually need it? I mean, if you take away death in the future, will people still want to live? Will people still want to be, it's a necessary evil to keep us going good. And why take it away? Why is that part of the statement?
So we shouldn't live, so I'll answer, seeing as you threw it at me. So thank you. That's why I'm great, by the way, those type of questions. Now, so the truth is, you shouldn't live to die. That's number one. So death is part of the world. There's no question it's one of the processes. However, the reason of the creation of the world is actually for the Messianic age. God created the world originally, and is a huge answer, to turn this physical world into a spiritual place. That's why all mitzvot have physical objects. The realization of that actually taking place, the actual fruition of that, is the Messianic age. Till then, there's death in the world. I always say the Garden of Eden, when you pass away, is almost the lounge you wait in between. At the airport, you're in transit. So that's almost your transit lounge to the Messianic age. So the purpose of the creation of the world is the Messianic age. In the process is a physical process of living physically, turning the world into a better, more godly place. Thereby, when you've achieved that, you pass away and you come back physically in your body again in the Messianic age. So a lot of these questions really come with a lot for greater answers. But death is not a bad thing. It is part of the creation of the world. However, the purpose of the creation happens to be actually the Messianic age, which is in the physical, which is why everybody comes back, even those that have passed away.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Rabbi Ash. Interesting question over here that Sol has asked. If all the Jews are gathered when Moshiach comes, how come the Rebbe said that South Africa will be good before the Moshiach and after the Moshiach? Okay, so obviously if you want to tell me South Africa is good before Moshiach, that's great. How come after? I assume that that's the focus of the question. So there's much to be said about that, including the fact that the quotation we always attribute to the Rebbe about South Africa will be good until Moshiach comes and better thereafter is an incomplete version of what the Rebbe said. If you go back, you can see that the video exists on YouTube. Actually, what the Rebbe said is, tell the people in South Africa that Moshiach is coming soon. That was the first message. Somehow that got lost in the shuffle. The first message is, Moshiach is coming soon. Till then, it will be good, and certainly thereafter. So in other words, the implication wasn't so much about, oh, don't worry, you'll still be in South Africa even when Moshiach comes. That said, there is an opinion, and the Rebbe was quite favorably disposed to this opinion, that rather than just simply all of us going into Israel when Moshiach comes, what we call the ingathering of the exiles, there's another principle as well, which is that Israel and its holiness and spiritual edge will spread throughout the whole world. So geographically, we might well still be in South Africa and yet be living technically in Israel. And that's about as much as we can do for that question under the circumstances. Somebody had a question, why does Moshiach come on a donkey? I saw that earlier. I don't know where it went. It was Josh. Rabbi Rabin, any appetite for that question?
So why does Moshiach come on a donkey? And I saw a very cute note that was written after that by Rabbi Stein, is that because all planes are grounded by Yehuda Stein. That all planes are grounded, so how else is Mashiach going to come? Anyway, so the idea of Mashiach coming on a donkey is, as I discussed before, it's brought down in the Talmud in Sanhedrin, where two various options. Mashiach either coming via clouds, or which is basically aragolically speaking, that Mashiach is going to come in a very swift manner. And that will come as a result of our meritorious deeds. So as a result of all the good work that we have done, all the mitzvot, all the Torah that we have studied, we will have brought about the coming of Mashiach, and Mashiach will come about swiftly. The other way is that if we are not able to bring about Mashiach through our very own actions, there is a case, there is a cutoff time when Mashiach is going to come. And in reference to that, that's brought down the verse that Mashiach will be like a poor person riding on a donkey. Ani bareichev, alachamar. And Mashiach will be like a poor person riding on a donkey, in that my understanding, and that unfortunately we weren't able to actually accomplish the job during our time, through our service. Rabbi Shishler, do you have what to add to that?
There's quite a lot to talk about in terms of Mashiach's donkey, including the fact that sometimes there's the insult that people use when a person walks into the room unexpectedly and you say, oh, speak about Mashiach, and his donkey walks in. But the Hebrew word for donkey is chamor, which is very closely associated with the word chomer. Chomer is the basic matter of which everything is comprised. And so therefore, when it says that Mashiach will ride on a donkey, one of the deeper messages is that what brings Mashiach actually is not just our engagement with spirituality and those things that are very abstract, but rather it's how we treat the chomer, the matter of this world. If we use the material things of this world as a means of serving Hashem, That's what causes Moshiach to ride into town. Another interesting question that somebody said, I'm going to throw this one at Rabbi Ash, if you don't mind. And that is, if you're supposed to anticipate Moshiach every single day, how do you do that when things look so bleak?
The same Saul Cowan. So first of all, so what happens when you let your shul members into a chat. So the truth is, at the end of the truth, and I really do believe it actually almost comes back to my camel story, is the anticipation of Moshiach, and a lot of people look at it as almost a runaway from reality. So we've got to look at the same time the definition of bleak. A lot of things in the world are a stepping stone for growth, and your headspace and the way you look at things define where it is. The entire world naturally is created that all down movements are there for to move forward. You push down on the ground to walk forward. We watched Elon Musk's rocket take off last week. You downward thrust to go forward. You throw a ball backwards to go forward. Often the negative and the challenges we face in life are there for opportunities to give us the ability for growth. If we get caught in the negative and don't see the opportunity, we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, or we see the light, we just think it's an oncoming train as opposed to sunshine looking through the end. And the truth is, often the challenges we are given are there to give us the ability to overcome and to get where we need to go to. So Moshiach really is the ability to focus and almost a channel to take our challenging times and use them as a stepping board to achieve the goals that we want in our lives. They're not there to bring us down. They're there to try to bring the best out of you.
Shkar, thank you. I think one of the things that's really important when you're talking about Mashiach is to be conscious of time. Because, of course, the big joke going around is that Mashiach does not have a good sense of time, and that's why he's not here yet. So we made an undertaking that this would be an hour worth of conversation. So we'll give a 5-minute bonus round because there are many, many questions. Luckily for us, 94% of the people who responded to the poll said you're interested in another one of these panels. So in that case, we hope we'll see you. 2 people have asked the question about 2 Moshiachs. One of you asked it, Dean asked it publicly, somebody else asked it privately. The notion of 2 Moshiachs, it's a very involved subject, which I think is beyond the scope of what we could do tonight. So suffice it to say this, it is not necessarily the case that there will be 2 Moshiachs, because the Rambam, who's the only authority to deal with the legal requirements of Moshiach, does not discuss Moshiach ben Yosef, the possibility of a pre-Moshiach before Moshiach comes. So suffice it to say, it does not have to happen. Okay, we had another interesting question over here, 2 that were very similar. Both were asked privately. Somebody asked, and how's about we divide this evenly between Rabbi Rabin and Rabbi Ash? So the one question was, well, what happens if a person loses, God forbid, a spouse before Moshiach comes, and then they remarry, and then Moshiach comes, and there's the resurrection of the dead? Now what?
If you want to be horrible about it, you can say you're stuck with both spouses, but we're not going to go that way because it's hard enough now. So the honest truth is, like, it's quite a complicated story. And the problem with you running this is you choose the questions you like, Rabbi Shishler, and you throw the others at us. We're going to stop that for the next round. Just FY, just in case, FYI. But stories as well. The honest truth is, there are certain things that practically and realistically we don't know. And because Moshiach is such a vast topic, and it is such a massive idea, and as I said, there are very few, first of all, there's a huge amount of information which varies across all the different opinions, but at the same time, there are a lot of things we don't actually know. So the general feeling is said, you'll end up being with your first bashet, but even if you look at reincarnation, you can have 2 bashet to come in the exact same lifetime. So practically at the end of the day, I'm going to say it's a great answer I've learned many years, is I don't actually know, and I don't think many do know. I do believe practically at the end of the day, so Rabbi Rabin, you'd and I'll be very impressed. But practically at the end of the day, there are some things we don't know. And I think God's best at running how neshamas work and who's best suited for who. And if you can resurrect the dead, I'm pretty sure God will be able to work out which is the correct spouse for who, based on deaths, divorces, and remarriages, etc. I've given Rabbi Rabin a bit of an exit if he wants it.
That's fine. We have another question for Rabbi Rabin, so that's okay. By the way, I think that's an excellent answer. I think it's very fair when it comes to Moshiach to say that there are many things that we don't know, but equally to say that we trust Hashem is smart enough to know how to manage the process in ways we haven't yet imagined. So the second question, Rabbi Rabin, if you want to take it, was somebody asked, so when Moshiach comes, do we get to see the members of family who we have lost? But more specifically, when, because you spoke about Tchias HaMesim and the resurrection of the dead. So when they are resurrected at the age they were? Are they resurrected at the age that they were in their prime? How does all of that work?
Rabbi Shishler, you sure you don't want to take this one?
I'm happy to take it. I offered it to you because you spoke about resurrection.
So according to, just very briefly, according to many sources that I've seen, is not to address necessarily the age at their prime, etc., but a lot of people ask the question of sickness. How will it be when people come back if they were sick? And, one of the biggest things that it says about that Moshiach is going to do is bring cure to the world, bring healing to the world. So all those that were blind will be able to see, and all those that were deaf will be able to hear, etc. When we reunited with our loved ones, is it going to be our Zayda as we knew him when he was 80 years old, sitting, on his couch? That I don't know. Rabbi Shishler, please go ahead.
So there are two views, as it happens. There are two views among the sages. The one is specifically that people will come back in the most wholesome form, and that will be the miracle. And the other view is that they will dafka come back in their unhealthy form and be healed, and that will be the miracle. I think the net result is really the same. By the time we engage and interact with them, they'll be in their prime on the one hand, but there'll still be a sense of who is senior and who is junior. Otherwise, there's no sense of respect. There are quite a number of questions, and I did promise that it's just 5 minutes of bonus round. So we're going to have to get everybody back again. We'll take one last question, and literally in the order that they came. One last question is Moshiach a real person? And if he is he hiding somewhere?
So you've all gone quiet.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say Moshiach is a real person. Is he hiding somewhere? His time for revelation isn't around yet. The analogy I often try to use, if you take a king, for example, King David and King Saul were around at exactly the same time. King David always had the soul of a king, but he was only anointed to become the king after he was given the leadership from King Saul. So the energy of Moshiach and the soul of Moshiach, and Moshiach is in the world. When will Moshiach be revealed? When will Moshiach come out? When will we know the Messianic person to be revealed? That'll be when it's time. But is Moshiach hiding? No, he's desperately waiting for us to bring him and reveal him out into the world. So let's all do what we need to do so Moshiach can stop playing hide and go seek and say, I've arrived, let's go for it.
Just in closing, Rabbi Shishler, I see the poll is that people definitely want another discussion on Moshiach, which please God will set up in due course. But hopefully through all of us going home, well, we're all home, but through all of us taking a book off the shelf or through doing some research on the internet and studying more about Moshiach and doing an extra mitzvah and reaching out to somebody else and just doing some more good in the world, hopefully we will have the real Moshiach revealed to us. We'll all be taken back to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel, with a rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash theory in our days, that it won't be necessary to have this panel to ask us the questions because we'll be able to ask Moshiach himself the very questions.
But basically, just to paraphrase what Rabbi Rabin said, the people who are the most threatened by Moshiach coming are the rabbis, because when he comes, we won't have a job anymore. Right now, we can entertain you and address your questions. When Moshiach comes, we're out of a job. You go straight to the top and you get answers in their best form. I do apologize to those of you who asked questions that we didn't get to.
Don't have a job now.
What?
A lot of people believe the rabbis don't have a job now due to COVID and the shuls are closed. So we don't need Moshiach for that.
Exactly. I think the people who believe that are generally the treasurers. Okay, let's leave the politics for another time. So, but it was really a pleasure. It was wonderful to have the engagement of so many people. Please spread the word, because I do think we'll do this again based on your feedback. Apologies to those questions we did not get to, because genuinely we tried as best we could to go in order. And to echo what Rabbi Rabin said, please God, we should have Moshiach now. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Shkoyach, thank you everybody. God bless. Have a good night.